Morning, party people. So I don't have a PowerPoint because tomorrow, from Wednesday I go back into another year of teaching, which is wonderful, but it's also technology laden, and I'm having a certain aversion to everything on a screen. So I thought it's maybe one of the things that Stephen asked us was really to, I suppose, just introduce some of the essentials of our practice. And every performance that I make is unique, and I don't just mean in the Peggy Phelan disappearance type way, but I mean I really genuinely, over 30 years, try to source and create a performance from scratch every time, with the exception that perhaps something from the previous performance perhaps slips over into the next one. In this case, this nail was in Montreal. I found it outside the building, and right beside it was a tiny little yellow bird. And it was so beautiful, and I walked around and around the block for an hour, and I went back and I went to pick up the bird, and then I realized that its head was full of ants, that the ants had already got to it, So I buried it, and I kept the nail. So it's often, for me, a process of transference, where it doesn't have to be the actual object. It can be a surrogate, but it still is, in my process, it still is like a channel or a conduit of knowledge, and I would sort of suggest really like haptic knowledge. Bricks have followed me all year. Marilyn and I performed in London in June, and the room I performed in a semi-derelict Victorian house, it had been firebombed, and the entire roof, the windows were bricked up, and the whole ceiling across the room was black. And I suppose it was funny because Marilyn and I almost came to blows about who gets this room. No, it was really interesting how we, how as artists we decide which space is the most relevant, which space has the right ambience for the character of the work. And I would say, of my work, if I go back to the beginning, it is based in trauma. And that's quite difficult for me. I've talked about it at length. I've written about it. And I sort of don't want to talk and write about it anymore. I'm in a process of trying to convert that trauma into whatever can be called healing. And I think there is a massive risk with performance art that in some instances it can be medicine, and in some instances it can be poison. And there are moments where I have severely re-traumatized myself through performance. So I think I proceed in performance with caution, and I try as I get older to listen to my body and respect the fact that some days the edge of that and the actuality of the edge of that cement and that those years and years of carcinogenic build-up on the inside of that, because it was inside the chimney, that all of that it's not a casual relationship as I'm lifting it and moving it. It's lifting and moving me, and everything about it is being absorbed, including on a psychic level. So I think with performance, you can hurt yourself physically, easily. You can hurt yourself mentally, your mental health. But I think also there's this question of spiritually. I think you can hurt yourself spiritually if you don't listen with what you're doing. So with this performance here in Quebec, these are from the building. So I like to have something that's come right from the structure, sucked out the structure. These little shoes are a substitute. The actual shoes that I wanted were a little pair of pink track shoes that were in a car park. And I watched them for 4 days, and because I didn't want to take something that belonged to somebody else or that somebody else needed. And what I loved about those shoes was that they had almost become dust. They had completely almost camouflaged themselves into the ground. And there was this strange, like a strange frequency, you know. They, thinking of Danny's Two Ghosts, you know. So sometimes things, sometimes things have a full presence. They even if it's static, like for example, if you've got a glass and it has one single drop of blood in the bottom of it, it can be more potent than having half a cow, you know, stretched out. In some ways, some things have a certain, create a certain alertness, and they can fill a whole room. I've seen something very, very small command a whole room, including everyone within it. I've seen a performer, you know, control a massive industrial space with one finger. You know, so it's this thing of presence is really, really mysterious. So I dug these out of the basement as well. And funny enough, they also had a resistance around them, and it took me a really long time to figure out if I could touch them. And it's not really appearance; it's more haptic, you know. Back to what I'm saying about like the edge of the cement, you know, the edge of the shoe, or the feeling of, is it still alive? Is there still potential? You know, or has something gone beyond the stage of potential? Another really important object that I used in the, you know, material I used in the performance was weeds, and specifically weeds that are almost fossilized. You know, they've gone through their entire growth into a state of decay, and they were growing. What attracted me to them is they were actually growing in artificial grass. So they'd pushed their way through the plastic, and they had survived, and that caught my attention. I think it's horseweed. I think that's what the weed is. But it was mysterious, and it had a certain potency, and kept taking fire on me, which was interesting, because you know, and this is something like back to influences that also Stephen asked us to talk about, and undoubtedly the top influence on my practice is Alistair MacLennan. You know, that's very clear, I think. Alistair taught me on the master's program back in 1992. He never taught me performance. He never teaches anybody performance. But he taught me about materials, and he taught me about living in regard to interconnection. And what really, up until I met Alistair, every artist I'd met before or who'd taught me before, what they talked about was process as production, and process actually as a method of control, so that you took materials towards your artistic vision, your artistic will. Alistair was the first person who showed me the opposite of that, and who showed, like, he would come into my space and he would look at my paintings and he wouldn't say a word. He would look under the table where I had my bars of soap, where I was like washing my brushes, and he would spend an hour talking about the color of the soap. You know, as a young art student, this drove me absolutely nuts. It's like what is it with this guy? Why doesn't he respect anything that I do? And it really took a long time before at a certain point in one just discussion, like I looked at the stain on the newspaper underneath the soap, and we both started to talk about that, and that was a breakthrough. You know, just this moment of realizing it's not about control. It can also be about receiving and acknowledging and respecting the materials, and respecting that they may just be bigger than you are. So I think a lot of what I do, I mean, I'll just wind it up, but I think a lot of what I do is basically like channeling through objects. And in this performance, even though here I am in Quebec, my grandparents were very present, and I don't know why, but but in some parts it can be something, as humble as the nail that takes you back to a toilet in a house when you were 4. So I think this kind of space between memory and feeling and emotion and, you know, the conceptual drive, because you can't make performance without some kind of structure. So how do you use materials to navigate, you know, because I work with as little structure as possible. I try to keep as much unknown before I begin, and I use the performance as that moment of awakening and transitioning. You know, so something, you know, like this, which Marilyn had handled, and for me there's also like a lovely lineage of working with materials that another artist has already processed. And, you know, this is like a classic, like, gaga of frustration. You know, it's, you know, we have such a strong destructive urge. And I think, you know, as I perform, I try to really kind of keep a mind open to what's the smallest intervention I could make in this moment, what's the least damage I could do, you know, and I try to, you're moving in and out through all these different modes and this whole spectrum of emotion, and it's not to be sort of stuck in one state. You know, I'm not in a trance. I'm coming in and out. I'm moving across the room. I'm recognizing that a car engine is roaring outside. All those things remain part of the performance. They kind of come in and through it, you know. But I suppose like there's two important things that I really care about. One is silence and one is stillness. And maybe get back to that in the questions. But that's it.
Now we have heard Gustavo, who was the last performance of the festival yesterday with Maria. Thank you again for your performance that closed the whole festival. So now I'll let you talk.
Okay. I'm really happy to stay here and share with all these great artists that stay in this edition of RiAP, and share with the organization, the friends, and the other artists. For me, it's very magic. I'm staying in a very difficult situation to begin the year and close. To stay here for me, it's very, very, very special, and I appreciate your lives and that you stay here. For me, it's very important do that the performances don't only exist in the academy or don't only exist in the museums or only don't exist in the museums, galleries, and institutions of art. No, I think the performance is overflow. It's more expand and have a own life and roots and rhizomas and I don't know. It's for me performance it's very important, and I think it's not exclusively to that kind of institutions. That's why Magda and I stay. Find some another places that share the performance with another people and more in community, not exactly in institutions. Okay, I think that the performances decolonize the body. No, for example, for me and the Latin American people, pueblos originarios or First Nation. I think that is very important, the performance in that way, no? Because it's a very strong and powerful way to decolonize. And I think it's not the same, of course, in all the world, no? is the specific context with, for example, in Mexico, I think it's very important, and for me it's very important, the performance very, very near or very close to decolonize the body, no? And performance life, no? In Mexico and America Latina, performing all time, you know, all the spaces and all the rituals, and all the, go to the little markets, talk with the miss in the grocery store, I don't see the big difference performance or performative and life, no? Another kind important for me is performance and ritual process, no? I think that it's not that about talk about that kinds of or styles of performance art, no? That you are ritualistic or you are minimal. Or you are, I think for me, all the performance have a ritual structure, no? And for me, it's that important to see in another kind of visions or in another manifestations of the life, no? And I think the performance is magic, no? The performance is one way, no, to stay very near to make magic. And the alchemy of being, no, this process of each of you that know what I am, no, what I want or not want. And I think for me it's very strong this process, because in each performance that I do with Magda or I alone, it's in constantly is what I am, what I am, what I am, what I am. And I think it's don't care, know what I am, you know. I'm very focused in the process and keep going, you know. And for me, the performance is a way to see another form, the life, no? Always in the school, for example, in Mexico, always is the same structure, no? You study that and then learn and then talk about, but not reflection, not happen anything, only repeat, only repeat, only repeat, only repeat, and it's bullshit, no? And this is sometimes, it's crazy because we stay and suddenly I do the same, you know, and only repeat, and only repeat, and it's awful. And when I see your performance, no, and see performance, say, oh, of course, exist another ways to know and to stay in touch with this life, fucking real life or not, I don't care, no? But it's different, no? I think it's very important that more people knows about, because this system, capitalist system, fucking system, it's very crash the minds, no? And only way to do and think and imagine is bullshit, really, bullshit. And I think the performance is a way to okay. Performance, art of the self, no? In too many workshops that I do, the people ask, no, what I do, what I talk about, that is this kind of reference that you know exactly that you say, no? And it's not, I think it's not the way. And start with this auto-knowledge, no? For me, this is 6, no? Self-portrait, no? Reflection of the identity on the self, outer and work, initiator and enunciated. Healing, of course, healing, no? that I'm listening Sandra and very touched me because I think that the performance is a way to healing, no? I do too many workshops in institutional mental health, and really, and on my own pathology, no? And really, it's one way to healing and feel better. Only maybe a moment, no? But it's really a way, no? Okay, art's in process. Performance transmitting energy, no? Sometimes, I mean, of course, the body, no? The materials, the space, no? But that kind of energy that I feel when I see Marilyn, Sandra, Greciela, Terence, Joachim, no, Cindy, and all the performance artists on the stage here is very nice for me because I enjoy it's floating me and on the wave of energy, you know. And I think it's, of course, we see, we have a perception about that what happened, but really the energy, you know, really this kind of the other body transmit for me. It's magic, and I appreciate all the artists that participate in this encounter. Okay, for Magda and I, in 2008, start Performance Morir with this vision to form to way to keep more close that the cosmos and the way to see a life, and stay in Orogachi, Chihuahua with the Rarámuris people for almost 2 years, no? Stay together. Stay together. I think this is the word. Cultural shock, of course, no? Rarámuri time, it's very special, you know, no? And see another way to live and stay in life, no? Performance Morir Encounter is in Orogachi, Mexico, and we are very happy to all the people that stay here and the people that don't stay, please come to Orogachi and Performance Morir. The Rarámuris is a pueblo originario that stay in the north of the Mexico. And it's a very particular because only people know more to the south, no, Mayas, on the middle, Mexicas, but in the north it's very hard because it's some kind of desert, but too dry, no, not this easy to food, only corn, no, it's a very pueblo originario that resistance all the time. It's a very temperature is very down, no? And we stayed there in Orogachi for 2 years and made friends, Rarámuri friends. At what time we shared the rituals and learned a lot. Learned a lot. Right now, this year that stay there with Lena, stay in Orogachi, no? And too many friends in Orogachi. I like it, and Magda said put, no? And I think it's a very different experience, no? I talk with too many artists, and one artist say, "Oh, this like folklore." It's good, no? Because it's a vision, is that you want to find, no? And it's nice for me. No, it's under the controlled experience. Or for me, I'm very preocupado, very worried about not exhaustive, no? About the culture or. of the ritual, no? Take care and stay close, but don't exceed the limit, no? For us, it's very important because when we talk with the Ramoris governators, talk about that is pertinent, no? And we don't colonize, no? And say, oh, now the performance in Norogachi, no? That another kind of more community that will stay there, no? Too many friends, no? And too many artists stay there, maybe 17, something like that. Only, Cindy, no? Greciela, of course, the first time, I think, no? Michelle, over there, no? Lena, no? And maybe Joachim, of course, Stephen, Thomas, Joseph, Shuya Chia, Loteria, Roy Bara, Valentin Torrens, and too many artists that stay there, no? And that you know about the experience, please ask them, no? Because for me it's important, the other voices that construct performance a morir. Muchas gracias. Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.
Follow with Graciela.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah. I have a presentation, PowerPoint. First of all, thank you so much for being here. I mean, and this is so emotional, really. Sandra, beautiful. You, my brother here, being with Marilyn, and yeah, fantastic. Everyone. So, water. Yeah, and it's also, you know, these events that are organized by us, performance artists. I am also an organizer in Buenos Aires. You're all welcome to explore the place. I won't talk much about the place. I will just, this PowerPoint, it's a way I found to combine, you know, like bullet ideas or concepts and images of things I have done. So to kind of go in a certain pace that covers a little bit of some things that are important for me. So it's a combination of text and images in a non-chronological order. The texts are very condensed, and the invitation and the visuals are documentations of my work. A selection, a selection of my work in performance and some multimedia performative pieces, spanning from 1985 to 2018, which is the moment that I did this, started with this PowerPoint that will become a book, but that I was in Thailand, the Rebel Artist Encounter that Vasan, our friend Vasan, organizes in Bangkok. And I thought, cool, this is it's a good form, you know, because to cut through some, like, anyway, just a good form that I found to present. So the invitation is to It's a kind of a reading between the text and the visuals, and to read it as a poem in a way, or as newspapers headlines. You know, you just go through it, and as a casual experience, right? So let me open my, don't worry if you don't understand something. Later on, maybe we get to talk. Yeah, we should get to talk a little bit. So anyway, okay. I will do the presenter view. Okay. And this is how it's called in the YY notes. And this is an excerpt for this occasion. Meaning will self-destruct. Utopia. It behaves as a strange ghost. Eternal, variegated, and extensive. Meaning is forever on automatic pilot. Like water, it finds its way, touching everything. One moment wet and invisible, invisible. One moment in the air. That ghost inhabits us. Secret, mystery, unknown. If places are a given and a body and existence are never without a place, where and why is the outside? In process of act, becoming. a thing or body is never without an event. Codes, conventions, laws, schools, stores, temples, jails, and nature. Within, without, the ghost is full of wants. The experience of the body is genderized, racialized, hierarchized, subjugated, abused. That object there that I am showing on this weaving is an object I found as a souvenir in Colombia. By the various codes, conventions, laws, schools, stores, temples, jails. My mother. This piece was also, it was a conference, performance conference, whatever. I made this action along with reading a paper. And this moment of the action is an homage to silhouetting. Silhouetting is a political action that was started, to denounce the disappearance of people in the last military dictatorship. And it was started by some artists, together with all the organizations of human rights and mothers of Plaza de Mayo, silhouetting bodies on pieces of paper and placing them on the walls, right? Because it was, all of that was happening and it was being denied. So it was, and the artist that initiated that, along with other two artists, is the professor of that class, and that he invited me. So it was an homage to that action, yeah. The ghost wishes to understand, to integrate. Keys, evidence, tests, passwords, puzzles, webs, mirrors, dreams. Plants. A resonant example of integrative material intelligence. Plants are our grandmother machines. Details and the insignificant. Which is always contextualized. The insignificant might be the telling song for when someone seeks to know. The latent potentiality of all things, movement in the apparent stillness. Sometimes the key is to ask a key question. Mother and I. Consciousness, knowing with others in oneself. Speech is linear, thought is not. Topical body of multiple roots. Utopian think, sensing body of multiple routes. Embraces an active not knowing. Places intention in the attention and attention in the attempt. I turn my ears to find the spark that moves the ghost spirit in me. The outside moves inside, the inside moves outside. Neoliberal air kills me. Bracelets from border crossings. San Diego, Tijuana, Tijuana, San Diego. The collateral benefit of rebelliousness. Forever grateful of my generational paranoia. This is a poster of collective actions that I started organizing in Buenos Aires, where in 2011 got a house to do that. And this series is called Constelaciones Decoloniales, de Arte Acción. Colonial, decolonial constellations and we meet at certain sites within the city with different artists. A lot of times is when artists are in residency in the space, which is called Peras de Olmo Ars Continua. And you see the little logo there, Peras de Olmo. And we work, each person brings their objects like you did yesterday, and we work for an hour and a half to 2 hours. We document that and create long films, you know. And because of that, and through the pandemic, I started an online festival called Cine Plus Perfo, cine and performance and audiovisual formats. Those are the trailers that, you know, of those different long duration films of the actions, the collective actions, and we're getting to the end. That is Noche, Nuit. And Girard, as well as Michel, they are godparents of Noche. Noche, they were in residency together with Yves Lapointe and Miriam Lambert. And she appeared there in the back of the house, and she was adopted immediately. I never had a pet, but she's teaching me so much. And, you know, we have meetings, and she comes in, she sits in the meetings, and she's looking at everybody like that. Amazing. C'est tout.
My work might sometimes be. So it was really an honor to be invited to join RiAP this year, and I thank everyone here at Lieu for all of their work in making this possible. Thank you. I am actually going to show something in chronological order, and I'm desperate for water already, but I don't want to spill it on machines and computers. I'm also going to read mine so I don't ramble. And for those who were in the workshop, I'm setting the timer. You will recognize the sound. Okay. So I was focused on the question of influences, what influenced my work over the years. And is that me? Oh, right, we're using up valuable time here. Okay. I grew up in the 50s and 60s in a small town outside of Buffalo, New York. And as a child, I was drawing and painting. I performed in plays that my sister wrote. I learned to play piano and trumpet, also bagpipes. I took ballet and modern dance classes, and I studied singing, including opera. Okay, so here, and probably a few more things in there. So this is the earliest documentation I can find of a performance of mine. And this is me directing a puppet show when I was maybe 8 or 10, maybe, I can't tell the age, on our back porch. So when I was a teenager, I read about happenings that were taking place in New York City, and my friends and I decided to form a group and create our own happenings, which for some reason our high school let us perform during assemblies when the entire school was there. But as a result, I was writing and performing and directing and also teaching performance during high school. I was reminded yesterday about an exhibition that I saw at Expo 67 in Montreal. The Czech pavilion had this multimedia event by Svoboda, and it just, it was astounding. Live bodies, projections, audio. That was significant for me. And also an optic and kinetic art exhibition that was at the Albright Knox Art Gallery in Buffalo. They had a brilliant modern collection as well, which I only recognized that it was brilliant after I left. I thought Boston would have something even more extensive, and no, Buffalo did. So I went to college in Boston. I studied theater directing. At that time, there were no programs that taught the kind of visual performance that I was interested in. And in fact, it didn't start being called performance art until probably my final year. I think that term came about when I was in college. But I could say most simply that I was interested in exploring aspects of live performance and that make it unique. So the possibility of using smell and touch, the fact that the audience and the artist can really impact each other because they're together in the same space and time, and then just the possibility of occupying space in very different ways, both with the work and how the audience engages with it. It's important to remember that prior to the 90s, information about, I'm going to go back. So in exploring those questions about live performance, I've actually done experimental theater, street theater, conceptual art, instructional works, chance operational performances, action art, endurance pieces, as well as durational performances. So I've really tried to experiment with a lot of different ways of being with other people, doing things. So yeah, it's important to remember that prior to the 90s, information about work outside of your own community was primarily from magazines and newspapers. Photos, if they were even included, were usually black and white with some kind of a written description of the work. So you really had to imagine the work. There was no internet, and video was a new medium. The equipment was expensive, and individual artists had very little access to it. Some people made films, but that was also an expensive medium to use. So documentation was primarily written and augmented by still photos. But so here's one that I don't actually quite remember when I first saw it, Dennis Oppenheim, called Reading Position for Second Degree Burn. But I realize now that learning about work through still images and texts required you to actually imagine the work. You know there is missing information, so you have to fill in the blanks to imagine seeing it or being there, what it sounded like or smelled like or felt like. In that process, the piece actually becomes your own. But this piece by Dennis Oppenheim was the kind of work of other artists that piqued my interest. And I realize now it was mostly conceptual art and works that highlighted the element of time. So Oppenheim's description of this was that he lay on a beach for 5 hours with an open book on his chest, exposing himself to the sun. And he described the piece as a corporeal enactment of painting, going on to state, I could feel the act of becoming red. So I am returning to my own work here. So really it was back and forth, seeing other people's work, making my own, and things don't move directly. You circle around ideas and try a lot of options. But in 1975, I began experimenting with performances in which the audience controlled the actions of the performers, and therefore the outcome of the work. And the performances lasted as long as the audience stayed. So in this piece, The End of the World, really clarified for me the distinction between theater and performance art. And I'm going to describe it, a little tedious, sorry, but the text was a theater monologue, page and a half, in which a woman is suffering a mental breakdown. She attempts to control it by very calmly and rationally, dispassionately describing what is happening in her life and the world around her. In a theater production, the task for the actor is to generate the appearance of the mental disturbance of the character, while also showing the effort to control the distress by delivering the text as calmly as possible. It does require the skill and training of acting to be able to create that illusion and that conflict. But I wanted to make the internal conflict into a real physical process for the performer. The clue for me came from an image in the text where the woman speaks of not being able to stop an overflowing toilet. So I asked the performer to continually turn without stopping for the entire performance. She could go fast or slow, she could remain standing or crawl on her hands and knees, but she always had to keep spinning. And she always had to keep talking. Each section of the text, and you can just see in these images, I think, was associated with an object, and they were placed in a circle around her. Maybe I think this one's easier to see. When the audience held up an object, she had to speak the words of the text. She could assemble the words however they came to her, in whatever order. She just always had to be talking, and very gradually she built up the words into something hopefully coherent. The audience functioned as her brain, really. And the performer was not in control. If multiple members of the audience held up objects simultaneously, she had to speak the multiple texts simultaneously. And the combination of words from different sections in the monologue began to generate new statements. So her obligation as the performer was to continue spinning and to continue speaking. The audience could choose to make it difficult or easy, long or short. They were watching a performer literally grappling with becoming overwhelmed and exhausted as she continued turning and talking. The performance was not over until the last audience member left. What I had designed was an endurance work of concrete tasks that created real problems for the performer to solve. Nothing was pretended or acted by the performer. It took all her focus to simply continue responding to the audience's bidding. The performance itself demonstrated the intent of the playwright's text. This is when I began to really recognize the difference between theater and performance art, between acting and simply being yourself, between simulation and reality. I realized at that point I was not interested in text and character and narrative, but much more interested in actions and materials and images. Onward, and I'm turning this off, sorry. Okay, I was down to 4 minutes, but I'm sure we used it up on something else. This, you know Taisheng She's work, Xia Dersheng, who was known as Sam Shea in 1980 in New York. In the late 70s and early 80s, I began reading High Performance magazine, which was published out of Los Angeles, and it mostly was West Coast artists, performance artists, and it covered people like the feminist artists at the Women's Building, Suzanne Lacey, Barbara T. Smith, Paul McCarthy, Chris Burden. But the Artist Chronicles made up a substantial part of each issue where artists from across the US and further wrote a description of a recent performance and included a black and white photo. So it was in 1980 that I saw Sam Shea's report on his clock piece when he punched the clock every hour. So you know it from, that was the only image I ever knew until much later. And some of you have probably seen the film of the single photos. So this is one taken like in the first day, and this is what he looked at by the end of the year. He was supposed to punch the clock 8,760 times, but he missed a few. He only missed 131. So that means he never slept longer than an hour, pretty much. Yeah, okay. Yeah, 45 minutes. So for sure that had an impact on me when I thought about durational work. Okay, so this is what I consider my first work of performance art in 1982, a collaboration with my partner, Bob Raymond. And interestingly, I've never talked about this work in public. You're the first, okay. And maybe because there are no images. So I'm gonna have to describe yet another piece to you, and you'll have to imagine it. We didn't allow the organizers of the event to document it, which they resisted initially and then finally agreed. I think we said we wouldn't do it if they didn't. So the performance began with me standing next to a small table covered in black velvet, lit by a single white light. And on the table was a pair of scissors, a big rock, and a beautiful hand-blown glass bell that I had commissioned to be made for the performance. And it just glistened in the light. Bob was videotaping the action, standing quite close to me so that details were recorded. I held up the bell, showing it to the audience. I told them about meeting the artist who made it. Then I began to ring it. The sound was beautiful, a clear tone that reverberated throughout the space. I turned it in the light so that the reflections moved around the room. Once everyone had listened to the ringing, I set the bell down on the table, and then I smashed it with the rock. Bob transferred the video cassette to a player, and I carried a small television in my arms with him carrying the playback deck behind me, and we showed the video that he had just shot to everyone in the audience. The images were lush, close-up shots of the bell, of my arm and hand holding it in the light, my face behind it. It was really beautifully shot and evocative. We returned to the table. Bob removed the video cassette from the player. I began to unreel the tape, and taking the scissors, I cut up the videotape into very small pieces that flickered in the light as they fell to the floor. The reaction in the audience was divided. Half of them were very distressed that we had destroyed the bell, that I had destroyed the bell. And the other half were very upset that I had destroyed the documentation. So, I want to say that it was really the local community of artists in Boston who had the most influence on my work. In 1983, Mobius, of which I was director, had opened a public exhibition performance space, and every weekend we were presenting experimental work in all media by Boston area artists. Between that and teaching performance art at the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, I saw thousands of performances every week. Not thousands every week. Performances every week, totaling thousands. I'm going to show one more piece that influenced me. This was a Boston artist, Ron Wallace. He really led me to think about audience of one performances, deep research, and durational work. I participated in his work in 1984, which was the 15-mile walk through the park system that circles Boston. The park system was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted and is considered a work of art. And Ron had done years-long extensive research on the park system, its design, what grew naturally, what had been planted, even what boulders had been moved in the park. He had researched the history and politics of its use, everything that was possible to find in archives and by interviewing the park staff. He did this performance for one person at a time, and the walk took about 8 hours. I think he did it for 15 people. But he tailored each conversation to respond to the interests of the person walking with him. It was only in the mid-90s that I began to perform internationally. And that's when I had the opportunity to see the work live of artists from other parts of the world. So I knew that I was already using up my time, and so I cut the last section of other work that I've done that resulted, more recent work that I've done that resulted really in significant discoveries for me. So I will only say that in 2014, when I did Marking Time 5 in Venice, Italy, I began to understand how to work in extended time. And it was that piece that led me to do 100 Ways to Consider Time at the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, which was 100 different 6-hour performances about time in 100 consecutive days in November to February 2015 to 2016. And then the other piece, just to mention, Water Moving, which I did in 2019 in Amsterdam, and I learned to trust a material process, giving it enough time and space for it to move and change at its own pace. The water was the real performer of the work, not me. So I'll close here and just say that I'm still experimenting and still learning. The end.